Living in Eritrea is an experience shaped by contradiction, endurance, silence, and resilience. For many people outside Africa, Eritrea is an unfamiliar name, often confused with Ethiopia or overlooked entirely in global news. Yet for those who live there or have fled from it, Eritrea is not obscure at all. It is a place where daily life unfolds under one of the most restrictive governments in the world. While it is not as widely discussed as dictatorships like North Korea, Eritrea is also an extremely repressive state, often described by human rights organizations as one of the most closed societies on earth. To understand what it means to live in Eritrea today, it is necessary to look at its history, its culture, the political system that emerged after independence, and how that system affects education, health, the economy, and the possibility of change. Eritrea sits on the Red Sea in the Horn of Africa, bordering Ethiopia, Sudan, and Djibouti. Its location has always made it strategically important. Over centuries, the region was influenced by African, Middle Eastern, and Mediterranean civilizations. The modern history of Eritrea begins with colonialism. In the late 19th century, Italy colonized the area, leaving behind infrastructure, architecture, and lasting cultural traces, especially in the capital, Asmara. Italian rule was harsh, but relatively short. During World War II, the British took control, and after the war, Eritrea was federated with Ethiopia under a United Nations decision. This arrangement did not last. Ethiopia eventually annexed Eritrea, dissolving its autonomy. That act ignited a long and bloody war for independence that would define Eritrean identity for generations. The Eritrean War of Independence lasted from 1961 to 1991. It was one of the longest liberation struggles in Africa. Entire generations grew up knowing nothing but war. Villages were destroyed, families were separated, and hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. At the same time, the struggle created a strong sense of national unity and sacrifice. Fighters, both men and women, were idealized as heroes. Self-reliance, discipline, and endurance became core values. When Eritrea finally achieved de facto independence in 1991 and formal independence in 1993 after a referendum, there was enormous hope. Many Eritreans believed they were building a just democratic society after decades of suffering. That hope did not last. The government that emerged was dominated by the former liberation movement, led by Isaias Afwerki, who became president and remains in power to this day. No national elections have ever been held. The constitution ratified in 1997 was never implemented. Political parties other than the ruling one were banned. Independent media was shut down in the early 2000s, and journalists were arrested or disappeared. What began as a liberation movement slowly transformed into a rigid authoritarian system. The government justified its control by pointing to external threats, especially tensions and later war with Ethiopia, as reasons for permanent mobilization and national unity. For ordinary people, living in Eritrea means living under constant surveillance and restriction. Freedom of speech does not exist in practice. Criticizing the government, even in private, carries serious risk. People are cautious about what they say, whom they trust, and where they speak. Many families have members who were detained without trial, often for years, sometimes indefinitely. There is no independent judiciary, and arbitrary arrest is common. Military and security forces have broad powers and little oversight. This atmosphere creates fear, but also exhaustion. Over time, many people stop expecting change and focus only on survival. One of the most defining aspects of life in Eritrea is national service. Officially, national service is supposed to last 18 months and include military training and civic work. In reality, it is often indefinite. Men and women can be conscripted for years or even decades with little pay and no choice over assignments. Some serve in the army, others work as teachers, construction workers, clerks, or laborers for state-owned enterprises. Wages are extremely low and do not allow for a normal adult life. This system has been described by many former conscripts as forced labor. It delays or completely blocks personal plans, such as higher education, marriage, or starting a family. For young Eritreans, national service is often the main reason they decide to flee the country. Education in Eritrea reflects both ambition and control. In the early years after independence, the government invested heavily in literacy and basic education. Primary school enrollment increased, and there was a strong emphasis on national unity and self-reliance. However, education is also tightly linked to the state's political goals. The final year of secondary school is conducted at a military training camp called Sawa, where students combine classes with military discipline. This environment blurs the line between education and conscription. University options inside the country are limited, and academic freedom non-existent. Many teachers are themselves national service conscripts, underpaid and overworked. As a result, the quality of education has suffered, and many young people see little future in it. Healthcare in Eritrea presents another mixed picture. On paper, the government promotes basic healthcare access and has made some progress in areas such as vaccination and maternal health. Clinics exist even in rural areas, and preventative care is emphasized. However, the system is underfunded and constrained by the broader economic situation. Hospitals lack equipment, medicine, and trained staff. Doctors and nurses are also subject to national service, which leads many skilled professionals to leave the country if they can. For serious medical conditions, treatment options are limited, and those who can afford it try to seek care abroad, often in Sudan or further away. The economy of Eritrea is highly centralized and tightly controlled by the state. There is very little private sector activity, and what exists operates under heavy regulation. Trade is restricted, foreign currency is tightly controlled, and imports are limited. As a result, shortages of basic goods are common. Many people rely on remittances from relatives abroad to survive. These remittances are so important that they have become a pillar of the economy, even as the government taxes and monitors them. Agriculture employs a large portion of the population, but productivity is low due to outdated methods, lack of investment, and environmental challenges. Mining has brought in some foreign revenue, but it has not translated into broad economic improvement for the population. Culturally, Eritrea is rich and diverse. The country is home to multiple ethnic groups and languages, and both Christianity and Islam are deeply rooted in society. Music, poetry, and communal gatherings play an important role in social life. Traditional coffee ceremonies, shared meals, and strong family ties remain central to daily life. Despite political repression, cultural identity has not disappeared. In fact, it often serves as a quiet form of resistance and continuity. People maintain traditions, tell stories, and pass on values within families and communities, even when public expression is limited. Religion is another area where control is visible. Only 4 religious groups are officially recognized by the state. Members of unrecognized religious communities face harassment, arrest, and detention. Even within recognized religions, the government interferes in leadership and activities. Religious practice is tolerated as long as it does not challenge state authority. This further reinforces the sense that the state seeks control over every aspect of life, from work and education to belief and identity. Comparisons to North Korea are sometimes made by journalists and analysts, and while the countries are very different culturally and historically, the comparison is not entirely misplaced. Like North Korea, Eritrea is extremely isolated, has no free press, holds no elections, and relies on indefinite military service to control its population. Unlike North Korea, Eritrea does not have the same level of personality cult or total ideological saturation. People are aware of the outside world, especially through relatives abroad. This awareness, however, often makes life more painful rather than hopeful, as the gap between what exists elsewhere and what is possible at home becomes clear. The result of all these factors is one of the largest refugee outflows relative to population size in the world. Eritreans flee to Sudan, Ethiopia, Europe, and beyond, often risking their lives along dangerous migration routes. Many do not leave because they want to abandon their country, but because they see no way to live a dignified life within it. Families are fragmented across continents. Entire villages lose their youth. Inside Eritrea, this creates a strange demographic imbalance, with many older people and children left behind. The question of whether change is possible is complex. The government remains firmly in control, and there is no organized internal opposition that can operate openly. Fear, isolation, and the absence of institutions make collective action extremely difficult. However, the system shows signs of strain. The economy is weak, the population is shrinking due to emigration, and reliance on external factors, such as remittances and regional politics, creates vulnerability. Some Eritreans believe that change will only come after a transition of leadership, while others hope for gradual reform driven by economic necessity. International pressure has had limited impact so far. Sanctions were imposed and later lifted, but human rights conditions have not significantly improved. Diplomatic shifts, such as the peace agreement with Ethiopia in 2018, raised hopes that national service would be reformed and society opened. Those hopes were largely disappointed. Still, the fact that Eritrea is not entirely sealed off from the world means that change, however slow, cannot be ruled out completely. Living in Eritrea today means living with constraint, but also with quiet strength. People adapt, find ways to help each other, and hold on to personal dignity in small, private ways. They celebrate weddings, mourn losses, share food, and tell stories. The weight of the state is always present, but it does not erase humanity. For outsiders, Eritrea may be a footnote or an abstract example of repression. For those who live there, it is home, with all the pain, attachment, and complexity that word implies. In closing, to understand what it is like to live in Eritrea is to move beyond simple labels. It is a country born from a long struggle for freedom, now trapped in a system that denies many of the freedoms it once fought for. It is less visible than other dictatorships, but no less real in its impact on human lives. Eritrea's future remains uncertain, suspended between endurance and the possibility of change. Whether that change comes slowly, suddenly, or not at all, the lives of Eritreans continue, shaped by history, culture, and a persistent hope that one day life in their country might fully reflect the sacrifices that created it.